Hello, everybody. I am Brantley Milligan, and this is Nick Johnson. Nick, do you want to say hi?
Hello.
So we are from the ENS team, the Ethereum name service. Thank you for watching. We are going to be talking about an issue that is on everyone's minds, scaling, and in particular, scaling ENS. So ENS currently runs on the Ethereum blockchain. And if you've been paying attention, the Ethereum blockchain has gotten enormous amounts of use recently, which has pushed up the Ethereum network gas prices. This has made it, and this is kind of pricing out a lot of use cases on Ethereum, including stuff related to ENS. So, I mean, I'll say, a year and a half ago, to register an ENS saying, we have our own ENS fee that's like $5 a ETH, but then the Ethereum network fee, that's one of my children yelling. Sorry about that. The gas fee would be like a cent, like used to be like 1 cent. I mean, it's like negligible. Okay. And now it can be like $50, $100. It's out of control. So the first thing, we want to say to our users and to people out there is, we don't like it either. And it's a problem. We agree it's a problem. And in fact, we are actively working to try to fix the problem. It actually have been already for several months. It's not an easy problem to fix. You don't want to mess things up or break things. And it's really, to fix it, we have to be sort of on the forefront of technology and doing things that no one's ever done before. So things just take longer, but we feel your pain. I'll also say I'm a little surprised that people are still registering .eth names. I mean, it's incredible. We're still getting hundreds of registrations per day, which really shows, I think, the strength of the community and the importance of ENS. And so we're happy to see that, but we don't want this to remain like this. So we're gonna just talk about our plans and what we're working on. The first thing that we're working on is something that we've already kind of discussed publicly. It's a plan to scale certain aspects of ENS. Nick, I'm going to pass it over to you to start talking about that.
Yeah, so the basic idea is that the ENS registry, which is the core component of ENS, will probably always remain on L1, but our L2 scaling scheme is to permit individual parts of that tree, really arbitrary parts of it, to be pushed to the L2 service of your choice. So if you own token.eth, for instance, you could set it up so that all token.eth subdomains are issued on Optimism or Matic or whatever's suitable. And so the idea there is that we're not tying ENS to one particular L2 scaling system, which means we don't have to try and sort of pick a winner today. And it provides flexibility for users of ENS to be able to build the solutions that work for them. And so this will be useful for two main things. One is being able to issue subdomains to users in a trustless fashion using the L2 of your choice. And the other is being able to update records, content, and so forth, the addresses that your name resolves to, and so forth, on an L2 without having to make an update to L1 every time. In order to do this, we've been pioneering some new technology around interfacing with L2s that, as far as we can tell, is entirely unique. It was originally, the basic idea was originally suggested by Vitalik, and we expanded on it in a series of community technical calls, and we've been continuing to do so since. And the basic way it works is it lets a user, a client who's resolving names, query an L2 without even having to know what L2 it is or how it works. And at a very high level, the way it works is that client goes off to consult the original ENS registry on L1 on Ethereum and asks it, where can I resolve subdomains of token.eth? And it says, oh, okay, that's on Optimism and it's at this address. And so the address it gives back is the address of a gateway service that somebody is running, the provider of token.eth, the owner of token.eth, or someone that they've employed to do it for them. And that gateway is capable of answering questions about subdomains of token.eth. So the second step, the client goes off and it asks that gateway, what does brantley.token.eth resolve to? And the gateway goes off and actually it's the thing to consult Optimism, and it comes back with a result. And then the third step, which is crucial to making this trustless, is that it then goes off, the client then goes back to L1 and says, here's the result I got from the gateway, is it valid? And the L1 code can then look at the results that it's given, and it can use whatever system that L1 has built in already for verifying results on Ethereum to say, yes, that's a valid proof from L2. And that means that you can resolve stuff via an L2 without the client having to know which L2 it is, and also without having to trust any sort of gateway service to get it right or to give you the right result. And we think that's pretty cool and applicable to a whole lot of stuff beyond ENS as well. So as we build this out, and we've been given very generously a grant from the Ethereum Foundation for this, we're hoping it'll be tech that's useful to anyone hoping to scale being able to read data from L2s.
Yes, and that is an exciting thing about this, is that this can work for any arbitrary data, so things outside of ENS. And there's even been, we've talked a bit about possibly using this for tokens as well. So that's a possibility. And yeah, as you mentioned, what kicked this off about 6 months ago is Vitalik just like published a blog post. It was like, here's an idea for scaling ENS. It was like, whoa, cool. We invited him to our annual workshop that we had last year, and he gave a presentation on it. There was a lot of discussion, and we had a couple of community meetings, with people from different wallets and layer 2 projects. And because again, we really view, so two reasons. One, we view ENS as a community project. We're a nonprofit. Everything is open source. We view ENS as basic infrastructure, not only for the blockchain community, but for the possibly eventually the whole internet. We're thinking of it in that way. So we want to be open in the work we're doing, discussions, and getting feedback from a wide range of people. So we had several public meetings last fall, I guess, in the Northern Hemisphere, spring for Nick, about this. And the current plan that Nick just described kind of came out of that. So it was an amendment of Vitalik's original proposal. And what's the current state of it, Nick?
So we put together a demo of the general sort of principles of how it all works using an example of a Merkle token drop. So rather than ENS resolution, which is a slightly more complicated use case, just the idea of having a large dictionary of addresses and amounts off chain and then being able to claim them on a token, which shows the same basic principle of go off and do a query, get the result back, verify the proof. We pushed that late last year. It's a fully end-to-end demo of that. And now currently we're working on the first sort of, call it MVP of the whole end-to-end thing utilizing ENS. And so for that, we're using Optimism, and we're using it to be able to demonstrate issuing subdomains and setting content hashes and so forth. And it's still a more restrictive version than the eventual implementation. It supports only a limited feature set, but the goal is to demonstrate that it's useful for practical applications, not just toy examples, and build an end-to-end example of that. Currently, I'm the one primarily working on that, and we're about halfway through. We have the smart contract code, which is kind of the most complicated bit of it, that can verify the results returned by the gateway and can produce the referral to the gateway. And I'm working on the gateway code right now.
Yes. What are you thinking like a timeline is for these various steps of this project?
I think we can expect to see a demo of the MVP, assuming no further distractions on my end, since there's always other competing uses for my time. But this is our top priority, and I think we can reasonably expect to see a demo of the MVP probably by the end of the month. And then the next step from there is writing up a spec for a complete system. We wanted to build an MVP before we went on to write a spec, because we know that when you're exploring experimental technologies like this, they tend to change and evolve as you go. And so we're building the MVP first, but once we've demonstrated that that works and we've learned stuff from it, we can start to write up a specification both for the general system, which will be applicable to everyone, and also for the specific implementation of the system for ENS.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, of course, when do you think users will start to see this, like in the normal manager in production?
I think that's probably a little further off, because step one is write the MVP and demo it. Step two is write the spec. Step three is implement all of this. And then sort of step four, which we can do in parallel, is add support to the manager. So I think realistically, that's probably about 4 to 6 months away if we go all guns blazing and top priority on it.
Yes. Okay. So that, just trying to give people like expectation here. This is not going to be like next week or something like this. But we are working on this, and a lot of progress has already been made. But there's still more work that needs to be done. And also, just to reiterate for people watching, this current thing we're talking about only applies to subdomains and records. It does not apply to registering .eth names or renewing them. So even when this is done in a couple of months, that process is still going to be painful from a gas fee point of view.
Yeah, that's true, and we have ideas for how the system could be used to register and renew .eth names. The way it would work would be more or less that we would have to pick an L2 for .eth second level domains. You would register using that, which would really cut down on the gas fees. And then if you wanted to do things with your ENS name that weren't possible on that L2, if you wanted sort of a more versatility of what you could do, then you could pay the gas fee to push that name to L1. So basically take the registration and forward it to L1 so that it becomes the same sort of registration that we exclusively have today.
Okay, yeah. So this was the next part we wanted to talk about, which is, okay, so the first thing we talked about was scaling subdomains and records, which is important. Okay, but then the next thing is scaling the .eth registrar itself. So like when you register a .eth name, where that is happening. Now, this is a little bit more complicated because, as Nick mentioned, it requires us to like pick a layer 2 where it's going to be. So with the subdomains and records, we can leave that, we can be agnostic. So we can just let people pick the layer 2 of their choice as long as it meets certain specifications and things like this. We don't have to commit to that. When it comes to the .eth registrar, we have to pick a layer 2. So a couple of things. One, we have to more carefully look at the layer 2 options. Two, we might want to wait a little bit to see how these layer 2s play out. Is one end up being kind of a de facto winner for the time being or something? Part of this is because once we put the .eth registrar on a layer 2, can we change it? Of course, anything is changeable, but it's painful. It's not something that we're going to want to do on a often, like, oh, what's the new layer 2 of the month or something like this. No, if we pick one, it's going to be there for a while. So we want to do it well. So we've talked about, we don't have as much of a formal written up idea for this. This is more in our idea stage. We're kind of focused on the first step. This is more of a next step thing. But Nick, do you see what we've talked about and what you've described there? Is there any theoretical barrier that you can think of that would prevent us from doing that?
No, it's a fairly in principle, it's a fairly straightforward implementation of the ideas we're already working on. There's nothing intrinsically difficult about it. It's only going to be a little fiddly because we're working with a live service with a lot of names. We want to make sure that we get it right. But the idea itself is sound, and there's not really any unknowns there.
Right. Okay. So let's say that the current project we had done by mid-year. Okay, let's just say, and hopefully it will be. How much more work do you think would be required for this other part? Let's say, assuming that there was a layer 2 that okay, this makes sense. You're not waiting for the layer 2 system to mature. How much more work do you think it would be?
I think that realistically, the bulk of the work is in that first part. And so we could be looking at something like that as soon as another quarter, another 3 months. But that presupposes that we have the development resources to go as fast as we'd like to go. And that means doing things like making the manager support in parallel with the code so that we're not writing one and then waiting for the other one to be done. But realistically, it is, in some ways, it's we want to be more careful with it, but it's also a less complicated problem than introducing L2 support in general.
Yeah, and side comment. So you mentioned there's like the smart contract work, there's the manager UI work. We are also in the process of possibly doing a significant redesign of our manager at the same time. So, there are many important things going on in ENS land that are all happening at the same time, and trying to do that. Okay, so given this work you've done some research into different layer twos and things like this. Can you just comment on what you see the current state of that? And is there a layer two? I know there's one you're using for the MVP. I don't know if you want to maybe discuss that and how you see this playing out.
Yeah, Optimism is the one I'm most familiar with by far because it's the one I researched for the MVP. The basic principle of this L2 integration, though, is that in order for it to work, you just need some way to verify the results on chain, on L1. And that's a property that every rollup should have, because otherwise it's not truly a rollup. And so that means that this will work across optimistic rollups like Optimism. It will also work across ZK proof-based rollups, anything you can verify on the chain. And in fact, if you're willing to accept some additional trust assumptions, you could use this to deploy your subdomains to like XDAI, for instance. You would just be relying on some signers to sign attestations that it's correct, which we think extra trust assumptions are generally best avoided. But if you're already using XDAI for something else, that may be good enough for your use case, for instance. Basically, it's a way of doing read operations like this without introducing any trust assumptions that aren't already present.
Yes. And by the way, if anybody's watching and you have a question, feel free to ask it on Twitter, like reply to the video or to our previous Twitter thread earlier today.
Mm-hmm. I'm also monitoring the Periscope site for any comments.
Are there any comments there?
Not yet.
Good. Right.
It's also worth talking about what sort of short-term relief there is for people that doesn't rely on us building all the L2 integration. And there are already ways for users to issue subdomains, for instance, which we think is the easiest way and cheapest way for a user to get to register a name for themselves, while registering a .eth name new for yourself is in the region of about 300,000 gas once you add up both transactions. Registering a subdomain can realistically be in the region of about 40 to 80,000 gas, which is a lot cheaper. And so there are already solutions for that. If you go to now.ens.domains, you can register a subdomain for yourself. But those solutions are, we think they could use some improvement, and we think that they could be more broadly deployed. So the other thing we're working on at the moment is better support for subdomain registrations. And the way we're doing that is by implementing a sort of a way of wrapping ENS names in a way that lets you add restrictions to what you can do with them, which intuitively may not seem like something you would want to do, but it's crucial to enabling trustless subdomain registration. The idea here is that I could take a name I own, like gimmeth, and I can wrap it in this wrapper, and I can set a flag that says I can never replace existing subdomains on this domain anymore. And once I've toggled that flag, you can take a look at it and you can verify yourself that I can't do that. That means that you can now trust that if you register a subdomain with me, your brantley.gimme.eth, then you know that it's just as trustless as .eth is. It doesn't introduce any assumptions there that I could interfere with your registration. So we're building that for this, and it will also enable a wide variety of other applications where you want to be able to verify that the owner of a name has removed certain abilities that they would normally have in order to ensure you can trust the name to resolve correctly.
Yeah, so in addition to trying to scale all of ENS and redoing the manager, we are also working on a system, I mean, just this is in summary, to add tons of new functionality to all ENS names. This is going to be .eth names, subdomains, and even DNS names. So this is going to be a major upgrade that really improves the functionality of ENS names. That I think is going to be a great thing. Another thing that we've done is, this is small, but it's us trying to be proactive as much as we can in the manager app. So when you register a .eth name, it's a two-step process, and most of the gas is on the second step, which if you were relying on your wallet to show you the gas costs, you're not going to see that until you get to the second step. So some people, they do the first step, seems cheap, they get to the second step, and oh my gosh, it's super expensive, and they're kind of upset. So we've put a gas fee estimate now before you even start the first step. This is in our manager. It's just trying to kind of give you a sense, ultimately the amount of gas you pay is up to you or your wallet, but it's just trying to give an estimate of here's what you should expect before you even start the process. We've done that. And then we've also considered possibly tweaking the cost structure to .eth named a little bit. Now, this would not be to raise prices or anything, people. We're not trying to hurt people. It's not price gouging. This would actually be trying to make it easier and cheaper for people, while also trying to encourage people to register for more years so that they get more bang for their buck when they are spending gas. Nick, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so a trivial example of this would be that if you register for 1 year, it's $5. If you register for 2 years, it's $10, which is the case right now. But if you register for 4 years, it'll only be $15, and 8 years would be $20. So every time you double the registration length, you add an extra $5, as opposed to every time you add a year, you add $5. And this is just a trivial example of how it could potentially work, but it's not, by any means set in stone. And the goal here would be our operating theory is that if you buy an ENS name that you want to use for something, you will probably want to keep it for a long period of time. And we want to make that easy and affordable. And we want to make it, in fact, affordable to register a name for long enough that you simply never have to worry about renewing it. You can register it longer than your expected lifetime, because that means that you're never going to accidentally lose control of it because you forgot about the registration deadline coming up and that sort of thing. At the same time, we don't want to make it trivial to do so, because if we do, then we expect to see the same sort of thing that happened with Namecoin and other sort of digital naming services, and in that massive numbers of speculators will come in, register up all the domains they can think of, and then resell them at massively inflated prices on secondary markets. And that ends up in a situation where the only way for you to get a name is to go hunting for it on half a dozen secondary markets and then pay an exorbitant price to someone whose only sort of redeeming factor is that they got there first. So the idea behind this massive reduction in long-term registration costs would be that it really helps our users because they want to keep the name for a long period, but it doesn't really affect the people who want to squat on names because they typically only want to register for long enough to resell it to someone else, which might be 1, 2, 3 years. So we're asking for feedback on this idea, and not just this particular one, but more generally, are there ways we could change the way that the domains are registered and renewed that would make it easier for people to register and retain the names they want, less likely that they'll lose them accidentally because of things like forgetting to renew or forgetting to ping it, without also sort of damaging the namespace by making encouraging a flood of sort of trivial registrations that don't get used.
Yes, and that's a key principle with how we're trying to operate the .eth namespace, which is that we don't just want the most names registered, we want the most names used. And those are not the same thing. So we would actually prefer to have a smaller namespace that's more densely used than a huge namespace that's like a wasteland of nobody using it, or just, squatters or something like that. So squatters out there, we can't totally stop you, but we're not on your side, okay? We're actively working against you. And fine, okay, people are going to do resale stuff, it's not terrible, but we don't want that to be the main way that .eth names are used.
And I think it's one thing that's come up a lot is really important to distinguish between people and activities. I have no particular enmity towards a squatter as a person. All I want to do is build a system where the things that help the system are encouraged, and that means registering the name and using it to point to resources. And the things that hinder the system, that make it less useful for other people, are not encouraged. And that means registering names just to resell them. And the reason is that every name that's registered and resold at an inflated price exerts what's called economically a deadweight loss. It makes the system more expensive for everyone without adding value to the system. And we really want to try and make the system as useful as possible and as cheap as possible without making that a problem.
Yes, and I would make a distinction as well between, some people have talked about this on Twitter, black hat squatting and white hat squatting, as some people have talked about. So black hat squatting, again, it's not terrible. We don't hate you, but we're trying to discourage it. That's where you're registering names for the idea of like either just selling it for more later or extorting famous people or something, or brands, or we don't. That's something that generally we're going to be working against. But white hat squatting would be something like that. The ENS ferry. And Mike DeMarais has been doing this, where like they get .eth names for brands and then like just give it to them at cost or for free or something like that. So the ENS Ferry guy, Validator.eth is his Twitter name. He's great, and he's been doing this for a long time, and it's wonderful. And he's helped a lot of people. And then Mike DeMarais, who runs Rainbow Wallet, he's been doing this for like some famous people. So he famously got SoldierBoy.eth. And then tried to give it to the real Soldier Boy, but Soldier Boy accidentally gave a Coinbase address, and then he didn't check that. So that was like a disaster. But he's been trying to get it to other people, like Terry Crews. I think yesterday he was tweeting at him that he has his .eth name. So I'd say that's like white hat squatting. I mean, that's cool. We support that. Feel free. Okay, yeah. So the message, like I said, that we would want to convey to people is that the high fees they're bad for ENS. We don't want them. We don't like them. And we are actively working on many fronts trying to solve this problem, but also to give people proper expectations that to have some significant relief here is going to take a while, and it's going to come in stages for different parts of ENS. So I don't think we got a ton of questions. I mean, like one person said we should migrate to Solana. That's not going to happen. One person said, aren't fees just high because miners won't budge just yet? I mean, I don't know. I think it's
a supply and demand thing. We can't reasonably raise the supply, i.e. the gas limit on Ethereum, without making it more difficult to validate. And this is a trade-off. But I think Ethereum is, broadly speaking, in the right point at the moment. And even if we doubled the gas limit, it's not clear that would be enough to satisfy demand. And so the miners are mining all they can. They have the incentive to mine, to fill the blocks up. It's not something that they can do. It's also worth pointing out, I know this is slightly tangential to ENS, 1559 will make fees more predictable and the UX better. It won't make things cheaper because there'll still be the same number of people demanding like more block space than there actually is.
Yeah, and there's benefits to that, but right, that's not going to solve the whole problem.
Yeah. No, I think it will be a good UX improvement. It has a bunch of benefits, but it is not a silver bullet.
Yes, and also just to make it clear for some people watching this video, the gas fees don't come to us.
Yeah.
So the gas fees are a network fee that goes to miners. There is the ENS fee, which is like for most things $5 a year, which is small. But those huge gas fees don't come to us at all. So it's not like, oh, we're jacking the prices and making tons of money. We're not. In fact, if anything, what that shows is that people are willing to spend a lot of money to get .eth names. That in effect, if gas fees were lower, ENS prices I think could be higher and people might still be registering them. But that value is being captured by miners. But I think
not meaning we want to raise prices before.
No, we're not. No. So where I'm going with that, we're not raising prices though, because our philosophy has been that we want prices to be as low as possible that do their function in the system. Yep. And I'm saying I think that this shows that prices are low, that they're not like super high.
Via ETH on the Periscope chat asks, who determines white hat versus black hat squatting? Nobody. We're not seeking to discriminate against users or to build systems that are, that have human judgment inserted in them to determine whether you're legitimate or not. We're simply seeking to build a system where the incentives encourage social behavior and discourage antisocial behavior.
Yeah, that's just like a term I made up, the white hat, black hat squatting.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, I think that covers everything. Nick, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about on this subject or that we missed?
I think we did a pretty good overview, really.
Great. Okay. So there's a lot of work to be done. We're going to get back to work. And so stay tuned. Have a great day.
See ya.